Afternoon.
Something going on?
Afternoon, Sean. Big game.
Quiet week, is it? Oh, that's it. Big game, good from you. Good from you. It's a fair one. Big game. Which is true.
We will get on to that big game.
Oh, I knew we would. I'm stunned that the big game question might come a little bit later. I'm amazed by that, actually.
There's worse questions to come from that side.
Is it? Okay.
We'll start then with the FA decision. They finally made their decision on Joey yesterday. Have you spoken to him?
Yeah, of course.
And what was said between you? Can you reveal?
Just what he said himself. He's, he feels it's a bit harsh. Obviously, I've made it clear all along. It's something that was before he came back in with us. But he has been a good part of what we do here again. He's disappointed, of course, and we're disappointed for him. We equally feel it is a bit harsh. Only for the reason, in my lifetime when I look, but I don't know how you balance all these different things that have happened in football. But one of the most obvious that springs to mind when I was a younger man was the legend that is Eric Cantona, kung fu kicking someone. I think he got 9-month ban. You are looking at someone, although I must make it clear, we know the rules. Don't gamble on football when you're in football, simple as that. So I must make that clear, and he knows that. But when you think the FA made it quite clear that there's no intent on anything other than his own personal gambling, and they've made that clear, his integrity is intact. Nothing about trying to change games or any of that, or consortium betting, just his own personal situation. Then you think, well, 18 months seems a long time to me, in lieu of some of the things I've seen in the game. But, the FA, we understand their role, we respect their decision, we have to. The good side of it, in the bigger picture of the sport, I personally hope and I think is they're obviously showing strength of these individual decisions. I can only presume they're going to move on to the cheating in the game, which I've spoken about for a year now, probably 2 years, which is a level when it needs to be sorted out. Constant diving, constant feigning of injury, constant falling to the floor. It needs to be sorted out. So if they're going to look at these individual cases, which they are doing, rightly so, then I'm sure they'll next move on to the bigger picture and the greater good of the game, along with the powers that be at the Premier League and the Football League, of course.
Joey has openly spoken about his addiction to gambling. How much of a problem is it, do you feel, for players in the game?
Well, I don't know, because the thing is that obviously due to the banning aspect, you don't really hear much about it now. So if there is anyone out there who's gambling, I imagine them to be doing it, behind the scenes. It's not something I've come in contact with any time. Obviously, down the years when I used to play, I knew players who gambled, not necessarily on football, you understand, but on various things. I don't know enough about addiction to give an opinion on where it lies and where it runs to and where it becomes an addiction. I don't know enough about it. But I know enough about Joey to say that if that's what he was feeling inside, then that's what it is.
Knowing what you do then about Joey, is enough support given and education perhaps for the younger players coming through?
Well, I think this will enhance that, or I hope it enhances that. That cases like these will bring that to the fore with the necessary people. I'm sure, to be fair, in my experience, obviously I don't work with them as much now, but the PFA were always there to help people. Whether this will remind them, and they do a lot of good work, I must say, with players and player education. A big fan of them and the LMA now, I'm a manager. I presume they are always working on, certainly the education side and, of course, the help side of things if people should need it.
You knew the situation, the charge, when you brought him back to the club. So, with that in mind, were you always planning to lose him, planning on this moment?
Well, we thought there was a chance, of course. We're certainly not naive, and Joe was very upfront about that when he came back in. Obviously as a business, that side was taken care of with Joey, and he understood that. And then on the football side of things, it's we didn't want it to get in the way of the fact that we thought he was a worthwhile player to bring back, and I think that's been the case. I think he delivered for us once again. So really, we wanted to get on with it, and kind of give him the platform again to affect us in a positive manner, and I think he's done that. It's a shame it's the timing of it, but that's the way it goes, because the timing was likely to be at some point. We understood that as well. But we move forward, as a purely on the football side of things, it's another opportunity for someone else to come into the team and deliver performances. So we'll look forward to that.
And on the football side of things,
Excuse me.
How does it affect your chances of staying in the Premier League, losing a player of his calibre?
Oh well, we'll see, because I've been I'm long enough in the tooth in football to know that, you know, all players are important. It's not about one player, and I think we've got some very good players here. So as I suggested, it's another opportunity for another player to come in and be effective for us. So, you know, I'm certainly not overthinking that, because I believe in all the players here.
He says he's going to appeal. If he's successful at any point, could there potentially be a future for him returning?
Oh, well, that's you know, too far out of my hands to even consider that at this time. That's something personal to Joey at this time. You know, he mentioned that he might do it. Now seems clear that he will appeal. We'll have to see how that goes, but that's for another day.
Now, you've spoken about some potentially nervy moments coming up between now and the end of the season. So, is this the most pressure that you've felt in terms of your situation?
No, not at all. I don't remember speaking about nervy moments, actually, but I remember speaking about the realities of the challenge. And, you know, we're in a strange situation where there is some facts behind our journey this season. You know, we took 17 points out of the first 17 games. We've just taken 19 points out of the last 17 games, on a bad run, by the way. So I don't know how that actually equates. But of course, on the other hand, we do know there's a reality to it. And, you know, it's timing of events. Can you win that game that counts? There are certain games that count a bit more than others. By the way, the league standings are, that is. You know, it's my job, the team's job, the staff's job to see about the reality of what we're achieving this season, because we are achieving. We've got more points than we did ever in the Premier League. It's now about taking it all the way. It's now about, you know, everything that you've learned over a season, delivering performances in these last 4 games. And you can only do that one game at a time. I've spoken about that many times. You know, there's a lot of perception about football, and our job is to see the facts of what we're doing, analyse the facts, analyse performances, and keep moving forward. And that's what we attempt to do. You know, we made the Premier League this time around because, if you remember, 2 years ago we didn't get a win in the first 10. Well, we won against Liverpool, and we actually factually had 4 points out of the first 5 games, and never said a really good start for Burnley. Well, we've just had 4 points out of the last 5 games, and now it's not deemed good. So, you know, it's perception against the facts. We as a club, without shadow of a doubt, are in really good shape going into these last bunch of games. But we're not naive enough to think it takes care of itself, because it doesn't. We have to go and step on and take care of what we need to.
Do you think then it's a psychological thing, perhaps because the gap between yourselves and the bottom, possibly because the form of those bottom sides has shrunk in the last few weeks?
It hasn't shrunk from about 7 games ago. It's actually got bigger, because Swansea were 4 points behind us, and now they're 5 points behind us. So factually it hasn't shrunk, but because the season gets closer, of course, we're not naive here. We've been through some high pressure situations before in 2 promotion years, tried to stay in the Premier League 2 years ago, and that's our challenge now, to stay in the Premier League. It always has been this season, not just ours. You know, there's clubs who have come up, that's their challenge as well. The one thing to be fair to us, I think, is that no one gave us a chance, and I'm not saying that to spin anything. No pundit, no one in this room gave us a chance of being in the Premier League on an ongoing basis. We are now in with a chance. So that's the first marker. Now it's down to us, I'll make that clear. Not down to anyone else, down to us to go and take our chance. We've
spoken in this room many times about looking ahead to the next game. So how potentially pivotal is this next game, given the opponents?
They're all. Every game's important. Every game, to get to this point, every game before is important. We understand why it's called the business end of the season. We've been down it, as I said, numerous occasions on you know, winning things and achieving, getting promoted. The fact is, every game's important during a season. The points were just as valid at the beginning of the season as they are now, but you have to keep getting points. Each game as it comes is a massive game, but every game in the Premier League, when you're us, is a massive game. This is just another one of them. A side that are in good form, they've got a very good manager. You know, people forget their journey, and I think there's a lot of credit to clubs like Crystal. They spent about 100 million quid this year under 2 managers, bought in 30 odd. So they've invested heavily. No surprise to me at all that they've won some games recently. Not at all. Top class manager who's been well versed in the Premier League. You look at some of their players, not a surprise to me at all. Definitely a tough game away at Crystal Palace.
Thank you. Sean, just back on Joey. You talked there about knowing the situation when he came in. Do you have any regrets on that? Was it the right thing to do that you knew about?
I'm not really one for regrets. You know, make a decision, move forward, make a decision, move forward. You still reflect, but I'm not really one for regrets.
In terms of his contract, it expires at the end of the season, so will you be looking at it?
No, give him a new one. We think it's good to give people a band new contracts. That's a good thing. as a business.
What sort of support are the club offering him in this situation?
He doesn't need any support, not from us, other than my support to say, look, tough one for you, that kind of support. But he's a man. I've mentioned many times. He's a man. He's not a boy. He knows about his own life. He knows about life. He knows about professional life in football. First things first, I said to him, look after your family. Go and look after your family. Let the dust settle. Take on with the necessary people that he has with his lawyers, etc., etc. But go and let the dust settle. It's a knock to him to the harshness of it, I think. But he's a tough-minded fellow without a shadow of a doubt. He'll be fine, trust me. One way or another, he'll be fine, I think.
Not sure if you heard Matthew Etherington on the radio last night, but he said when he was at West Ham, betting companies came into the club and spoke to players about how much they could invest, how they could spend as much money as they like. Do we need to look at football's relationship with betting companies?
Well, that's certainly not my decision. Betting for me, I'm tighter than a creaky door inch. So, betting for me is like, I struggled to put £2 on a roulette table. The odd time I've ever been dragged in a casino. So I don't really understand the mentality towards betting as people who gamble a lot do. As regards education, as regards the welfare of the game, there's people who are much more informed on the commercial side of the game and why betting companies are so heavily involved, other than the obvious, which is advertising. There's much more people more involved with more depth of knowledge than me to give an opinion on that. But I'm sure it'll be looked at just because of the nature of cases like this.
Yeah. What sort of education, you mentioned the PFA, but what sort of education do you provide to your players, and will the advice to especially the younger players now be sharpened here at Burnley given what you've experienced?
Well, the thing you've got to remember is if you say don't gamble, well, that's a start point. Now, but you can't force anyone to do that. You can only offer opinion, excuse me, and advice and support if someone is in a situation where they need support, of course. And we do that as a club. What I was saying, the PFA, I think, in my experience when I was a player, do a very good job of highlighting some of the things that are important to yourself as a person, not just as a footballer. In this case, if it enhances that look at gambling within sport or within football, and reaffirming really the facts of it, don't gamble when you're in football, is a pretty simple message. Beyond Joey's case, then that must be helpful. But I get the feeling that most footballers know it. It's up to them whether they decide to do it. Joey knows that. He decided to gamble. He knew that. The pleasing thing, I think, from Joey's point of view, is his integrity is intact. The FA's made it quite clear, abundantly clear. There's nothing other than his individual bets on any given situation. No angles to it. That's it. And I think that's important for him, and I think it's a valid point.
But just finally, given that message that no gambling, and we know the rules, seeing it plastered on shirts and seeing the Football Association themselves in partnerships with betting companies, is that hypocritical?
Well, I think it's the reality, whether it's hypocritical or not. Football's a massive, massive business now. We all know that. Many people want to be linked to football for many different reasons. Advertising's a big one. Yet again, it's the controlling powers of football. They can decide, whether that's relevant, whether it should be or shouldn't be. It's not for me to decide that without a shadow.
Sean, the last few seasons you've had pressure in terms of coming up and trying to battle to stay in the Premier League. How much do you think that will help you and your players this season?
Well, there's no guarantees on that because it's a different challenge in the Championship. Excuse me, but I think so far the players have had the clarity to see through many situations, in the Premier League, because every game is an important game. Still delivering performances through the ups and downs of a season. Not as easy to come by wins in the Premier League, obviously, as what it was in the Championship. Not the Championship's easy, but we were rolling. We were, a strong, very strong unit. In the Premier League, you go back to square one again. It's almost like, right, okay, we're not going to be the market leaders financially. We're not going to be the market leaders with depth of squad, etc., etc. It's taking on the realities of the challenge, knowing what you know about yourselves, what you've learned, and then piecing it all together on a weekly basis. And we've done pretty well with it over a season. I've said many times the club's in amazing shape here, on and off the pitch. But you'll only be judged really on divisional status at the end of the season. That's just the reality of what it's like to be a manager, my staff and the players. So that's our challenge, stay in the Premier League.
Does it concern you the lack of goals at the moment in comparison to what you were perhaps doing?
Nothing overly concerns me in the Premier League. I've been through it before because it's a big challenge to score one end, stop at the other. It's simple as that. Or a bigger challenge, you know, when you're us in this division. It's I think over a season we've done well with both. You know, we have scored goals at important times. We got a very good goal against Stoke, which won us the game 1-0. At other times we've missed chances, we've created enough, not taken them. Sometimes you do that, but you do it often enough and you do start scoring. So I think we've been doing it often enough. I think we've been creating enough to score more goals than we have. That's a good sign in itself, but then of course you've got to take the chances when they come.
Just finally, how impressed have you been with what Palace have done in recent weeks?
Well, I was just mentioning there, it's not a big shock to me. I look at the money the club spent in the last year on some real quality players. I personally, I like Alan Pardew. I think he's a very good manager. Sometimes it just doesn't work for you. He came out, Sam goes in, another top manager, you know, with a very strong group of players, I personally thought. So when the start wasn't as good as they'd hoped, when you look at the games they've won since, if you put them in amongst the start when Sam first got there and over a season, then they're about right, really. Probably under where they probably should be over a season, that is. But recently, without a shadow of a doubt, really strong run of results. Some surprises in there, but not overall where they are in the division, I don't think, because they're a strong unit. And it's another big challenge for us, of course.
Okay, broadcast section complete.